1948 has come to an end, but post-World War II change has not.
The British Empire continued to shrink as Burma and Ceylon gained independence, and the British Mandate of Palestine was terminated.
In the former mandate, the Jewish state of Israel declared independence, igniting an Arab-Israeli war.
West Germany adopted its own currency, and the Soviet Union responded by imposing the Berlin blockade, triggering a US-led airlift and intensifying Cold War tensions.
The first post-war Olympics were hosted in London, United Kingdom.
Animals took to the skies as the US launched a monkey into space and relocated beavers by air. I'm Indy Neidell.
I'm Spartacus Olsson, and this is War to War News.
Brought to you by TimeGhost, makers of the finest history that money cannot even buy. Now, before we get to the events of 1948, let's briefly look at where 1947 left us as 1948 began.
A lot of changes were inherited from 1947. For one, the British Empire beginning to crumble and shrinking by 2/3 as India and Pakistan gained independence.
The US stepped up to shape a new global economy while clearly opposing autocratic communism, with US President Harry Truman announcing his doctrine of containment.
Right. On the tech front, the microwave oven arrived in US kitchens, changing cooking forever. You called it nuking, Indy.
I'm totally sticking with that.
Meanwhile, the USSR tightened its grip on Eastern Europe and the Western Allies consolidated their zones in Germany. Plus, the US passed the National Security Act, creating the CIA, and the Soviets formed the Cominform to hold the communist countries to heel.
And let us not forget Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball and Christian Dior's new look in fashion.
Oh, and Britain finally decided to hand the Palestine issue over to the United Nations as they couldn't find a solution themselves. Which brings us to 1948 and the continued trials and tribulations inside that crumbling British Empire.
Okay, so 1948 saw the continued reshaping of the global map, and the British Empire certainly felt those tremors. We saw Burma gain its independence from the United Kingdom on January 4th, 1948, becoming the Union of Burma. Sao Shui-taik became its first president, and U Nu its first prime minister. That is a significant chunk of territory and people stepping away.
Absolutely, and just a month later, on February 4th, Ceylon, which we now know as Sri Lanka, also became an independent country. Interestingly, though, it remained within the British Commonwealth and continued to recognize King George VI as the King of Ceylon. So a move towards self-governance, but still maintaining some ties.
But perhaps one of the most significant and certainly most tumultuous departures was the termination of the British Mandate of Palestine on May the 15th.
Right, you are, Indy. And as the mandate ended, the Israeli Declaration of Independence was made on May 14th. This immediately led to a very volatile situation with expeditionary forces from Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, and Iraq invading Israel and clashing with Israeli forces. So the end of the British rule didn't exactly usher in an era of peace in that region. Quite the opposite.
Well, while Europe did remain at peace, the tensions between East and West kept mounting, largely driven by financial issues this year.
You mean the new West German currency?
Yep, I mean the new West German currency. On June 18, 1948, the US, Great Britain, and France cooperated in replacing the occupation currency with the Deutschmark in their sectors. This was a big move towards solidifying the Western-controlled part of Germany.
And the Soviets weren't exactly thrilled about it, as they had their own ideas about Germany's future.
Just a few days later, on June 24th, Joseph Stalin, leader of the Soviet Union, unhappy with the policies of the US, Britain, and France, really put his foot down. He ordered all rail and road routes to the western-held sectors of Berlin be cut off. Berlin is, as we know, deep inside the Soviet zone, East Germany. The Berlin blockade had begun.
So how did the West handle that? Just sit back and watch West Berlin get cut off?
Not at all. The US, leading the charge, launched an incredible operation. On June 25th, daily flights and transport of goods to West Berlin started. This Berlin Airlift, as it has become known, is a massive undertaking to keep West Berlin supplied.
And as 1948 ends, the Soviets haven't backed down. The airlift continues, and there are even whispers of a new European war between the not-so-long-ago Allied nations.
The West German currency reform was not the only financial development the West pushed through. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, which was agreed upon the year before, really started to solidify its role.
Yeah, while the ink might have dried in 1948 was the year the promise of reducing trade barriers and laying the groundwork for modern global trade systems started to take firmer root. The hope was to boost everyone's prosperity and foster cooperation, a direct response to the economic nationalism and tariffs that fueled the interwar period.
And speaking of massive undertakings to reshape the post-war world, we cannot forget President Harry Truman signing the Marshall Plan on April 3rd, 1948.
Indeed, authorizing a staggering $15 billion in aid for 16 countries, primarily in Western Europe. It was intended as an immediate response to the devastated European economies after the war and severe harvest failures in the past 2 years.
$15 billion. Let me think. Let me see. I'm going to cast my eye into the future and pick like a multiple of 5 and say that by 2025, it's going to be worth $197 billion.
Sounds like a very specific and precise guesstimate.
Yes.
I think you know more about the future than you're letting on, Indy. Anyway, these 3 events, the Berlin blockade, the GATT, and the Marshall Plan, in their own ways, were about establishing a new, albeit fractured, global order in the wake of the war.
While the West is driving for a global order based on private enterprise, market economy, and free trade, the East is trying to solidify a system of government-controlled plan economy subjected to communist ideology and Moscow.
Yep, and we're seeing that clash play out clearer and clearer. The Marshall Plan was originally aimed at all of Europe, but when the Soviets blocked their communist dominions in Eastern Europe from benefiting from the plan, the Americans shifted to a regionalist approach, aiming to rebuild Western Europe into an integrated trading bloc, and importantly, bolster it economically against Soviet expansionism from the East.
There was some initial resistance in Congress, with Republicans calling it a bottomless pit of wasteful altruism, but the communist coup in Czechoslovakia seems to have changed their tune, leading to its approval.
For more on that coup, we turn to our very own correspondent for Eastern Europe, Sebastian Brandstetter.
Thank you, Spartacus. The coup in Czechoslovakia in February put on full display the tightening Soviet grip on Eastern Europe. The Communist Party there had been looking to consolidate power for some time, but in difference to, for instance, Poland, democracy had prevailed until this year. By February 8th, the communists were openly stating their intention to speed up socialism, working with the General Confederation of Labor and left-wing Social Democrats to prepare for the nationalization of significant private property. Things really started to escalate when Parliament demanded a report on the Communist Interior Minister's misuse of police on February 13th. But the communists weren't backing down. In a clear indication of their disregard for democratic processes, Antonio Zapotocki, a powerful figure in the party, declared on February 15th, "Away with Parliament if it will not fulfill the program of the General Confederation of Labor." By February 18th, the Communist Party was announcing measures to safeguard the Republic and mobilizing its members and sympathizers. The pressure continued to mount, with communist labor leaders pushing for the nationalization of major industries by February 19th. Then comes the breaking point. On February 20th, all but 1 non-communist ministers in the ruling coalition resigned, hoping to force early elections. But the communists were ready. On February 25th, the communist interior minister used the police to surround government buildings. That same day, the communist prime minister Klement Gottwald ordered action committees to seize authority in Prague and across the country. The liberal president Eduard Beneš was left powerless, unwilling to risk a civil war. The only non-communist who remained in government was Foreign Minister Jan Masaryk, who chose to try to resist the coup from the inside. That resistance ended on March 10th, when Masaryk mysteriously fell to his death from the bathroom window of his foreign ministry residence. With that, the communist takeover was a fait accompli. The international reaction was also significant. President Truman directly blamed the Soviet Union for the coup. In a speech to Congress on March 17th, he called for the passage of the Marshall Plan and other measures to counter Soviet influence. If it wasn't made clear already, the coup highlighted the division of Europe into two distinct blocs that UK Foreign Minister Ernest Bevin had foreseen even before the breakdown of talks over Germany in late 1947. It is safe to say that a state of Cold War in Europe is now a fact. Back to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Sebastian. Even in areas where one would think everyone would all agree, these divisions were apparent. For the past couple of years, the United Nations have cooperated to draft a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR.
It's an expansion of the broad rights of the Atlantic Charter from 1941 that the United Nations alliance signed on for as they fought against the tyranny of the Axis powers.
But when the final UDHR document was put to a vote in November, the USSR and their dominions abstained from approving the principles they themselves had been part of formulating. While abstention is not the same as rejection, the vote did pass with majority approval, it was a clear message.
The main contention was about property rights, which the Soviet representative had already watered down. But the abstention should also be seen in light of that Stalin and his foreign minister Vyacheslav Molotov are documented to have signed on to the Atlantic Charter with the deliberate intent to only pay lip service to it.
While the nations of the world couldn't come together in unison around the UDHR, many of them did join in friendly competition at the first Olympic Games since the infamous Nazi-branded Games in Berlin 1936.
Like those games, the London event was broadcast on the nascent television networks of the world. But that wasn't the only major event that was televised. In the US, the anti-communist crusade by America's Congress was broadcast to 500,000 households with a TV. And all the others with a radio.
In focus was the hearings of the HUAC, the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and an exchange between two persons under scrutiny for allegedly being Soviet agents, Alger Hiss and Whittaker Chambers. For more on that, we hand over to our intelligence correspondent, Anna Deinhard.
Thank you, boys. As you noted, back in August, the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, very much found itself at the center of national U.S. attention. Whittaker Chambers, a former communist, leveled accusation against Alger Hiss, a prominent former State Department official, alleging he had been a communist during his time in federal service. Mr. Hiss vehemently denied these claims. These dramatic hearings, parts of which were even televised, captivated the American public. A special subcommittee of HUAC was formed to investigate these serious allegations. Leading that subcommittee was a young congressman from California, Richard Nixon. Mr. Nixon's determined questioning and persistent pursuit of the truth significantly raised his public profile. His role in the Hiss case has been widely noted and has undoubtedly positioned him as a key figure in the growing anti-communist sentiment in America. While the hearings concluded this year without a definite legal judgment, the accusations against such a high-ranking official have fueled public concerns about possible communist infiltration within the US government. Many observers believe this case has created a fertile ground for an even stronger wave of anti-communist action in the years to come. Indeed, the anxieties laid bare in the Hiss hearings are likely to shape the political landscape as we move into 1949.
You know, the heated exchanges between Hiss and Chambers are likely not the last news items that will cause a stir with the ever-growing number of television viewers.
That's right. Both in Great Britain and the US, television networks launched daily news coverage this year. This comes as the number of households with television sets looks to boom into the millions in coming years.
If anyone can tell us more about that, it's our very own television-friendly Anna Deinhard.
Across the Atlantic, the familiar crackle of radio waves is beginning to share airtime with a burgeoning new medium, television. 1948 marks a significant year for the launch of televised news services in both Great Britain and the United States. In Britain, the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, inaugurated its television newsreel on January 5th. This marked the dawn of regular visual news reporting for British audiences. Later in the year, the BBC further showcased the power of television by broadcasting the Summer Olympic Games from London, bringing the global sporting event directly into homes. Meanwhile, in America, the television landscape is also shifting. The American broadcasting company ABC commenced its television services on April 19, with its initial broadcast on WFIL-TV in Philadelphia. Then in August, CBS TV launched a 15-minute nightly newscast, solidifying the presence of regular television news in the United States. While television remains uncommon in the US as of late 1948, industry insiders predict a rapid expansion. Projections suggest that the number of television sets in American homes is poised to reach over 1 million in 1949. This dawning age of televised news promised to reshape how citizens in both nations receive information and witness the unfolding events of an increasingly complex world. Back to the studio.
Exciting stuff. Before we know it, we'll all have TV, and maybe we'll have them with us wherever we go.
How's that going to work? Have you seen the size of a television set?
They'll shrink. It won't be long before you can carry them on your wrist. Yeah? Like a watch.
What, like Dick Tracy's radio wristwatch? How the hell will you see anything on a screen that small?
We'll have better vision in the future.
Okay, I guess we shall see. Anyway, this year one animal got a brief vision of something any human being is yet to see with their own eyes. The world as seen from space.
Wait. You mean that poor rhesus monkey, what's his name, Albert the First, they sent up in a V2 rocket from White Sands, New Mexico? I don't think he saw anything. Not only did he not have a window, he suffocated before he came back by parachute. Moreover, he didn't really reach space. He went up 63 kilometers. That is 37 kilometers short of the Kármán line.
Okay, you're right.
I am.
But a Soviet rocket did reach space, albeit without any monkey on board.
Or any other animal for that matter. The intended payload of the R-1 missile they sent up above the Kármán line was an atom bomb, although for this test that too was not on board.
Well, how could it be? The commies don't have the bomb.
Yet. But speaking of flying animals, what is with those beavers?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. In Idaho, USA, increased urban development has been causing conflict between growing suburban populations and beavers building dams causing flooding of residential areas. On the other hand, the beavers are crucial to preserve Idaho's wetlands. So the Idaho Department of Fish and Game have been relocating beavers already since the 1920s.
And now they are doing it by plane?
Better still. In August this year, they started relocating them by parachute drop. We have a little film about that.
What will they think of next?
How about that the universe didn't start by God saying something, but with an explosion?
So instead of, in the beginning was the Word, we get, in the beginning there was a big bang?
That's exactly what they're saying. They being scientists George Gamow, Ralph Alpher, and Hans Bethe, who published a paper this year that brought together several theories indicating an ever-expanding universe based on findings by people like Albert Einstein, Alexander Friedman, and George Lemaitre. In the paper, Gamow, Alpher, and Bethe proposed mathematical proof that this expanding universe and all matter in it was created when a singularity instantly and suddenly exploded on a cosmic scale.
Okay, that does sound like a Big Bang theory. And with that, boom, we've reached the end of our coverage of 1948. When we return in the first quarter of 1949, Sparty and Sebastian will dive deeper into the Arab-Israeli war we spoke of earlier.
It is the TimeGhost Army who make all of what we do possible. Join the ranks of this force to be part of spreading knowledge about what humanity has been doing with a world that was eventually created by the force of that Big Bang by signing up on timeghost.com or patreon.tv.
Wait. No, timeghost.tv or patreon.com.
Did I say the other way around?
Yeah, you said the other way around, but that's okay. All right. Excelsior! No, that's right. That was a good ending. That's a good ending.